everyone. I think we're going to get started. We have about 67 of you on. We're supposed to get about 100, so I expect some to kind of trickle in. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. As I was telling Hilaree before this presentation, we don't only have Coloradans in our presence, but we also have people from New York, Kentucky, California, Wyoming. So we're spanning the entire nation tonight. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for supporting the Colorado Mountain Club and joining us for one of our CMC online university events. Please make sure to check out cmc.org for more information on Colorado's #1 destination for outdoor recreation, education, and conservation. Whether it's through your rock climbing classes, couloir climbs, or through our conservation projects, there's something for everyone at the CMC, so definitely check us out. A couple housekeeping items. Please make sure that you keep yourself muted during the presentation. I know you're all probably super familiar with this by now, but it really helps to not distract from the storytelling tonight. We appreciate it in advance. Additionally, the presentation will probably run for about an hour, and we'll leave some time for questions at the end. So if you do have those questions, utilize that chat box for them, and I'll make sure to ask Hilaree everything at the end. So, but it's fun to kind of engage in the chat while she's chatting or while she's talking, so definitely utilize that. One last item that actually really helps is to turn off your screen. This will really help with internet bandwidth so that we can all just pay attention to the presentation and have a little bit more HD version of it. So really helps. Additionally, as promised, Hilaree has brought an awesome North Face jacket from her athlete kit. So it's the only one of its kind at the North Face because it's from her athlete kit. And the winning registrant is Michelle Delorto, and we'll present that at the end. I'll make sure to get the contact information so we can send that out to you. But congrats, Michelle. Go you. Thank you, North Face. Thank you, Hilaree.
I don't have it with me. Otherwise, I'll show it to you.
Yeah, we'll show it at the end. I think I mixed up that order, but awesome, guys. So I'm going to present and introduce our speaker for tonight, Hilaree Nelson. Hilaree is a professional adventurer, a ski mountaineer, an activist, an inspiring speaker, and a mom and a lover of wild places. Combining a passion for exploration, mountain adventures, and skiing, Hilaree has traveled to some of the most exotic mountain ranges on Earth. Her expedition career has led her to many firsts in the world of ski mountaineering, including linking two 8,000 meter peaks, Everest and Lhotse, in one push. First ski descents on Baffin Island, a first American ascent and ski descent of Papsura Peak in India, and a first ski descent of the 4th highest peak in the world, Lhotse. She's the captain of the North Face athlete team, an active leader on climate with Protect Our Winters, and an avid proponent of wild places, such as the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. She holds to the philosophy that these remaining wild places have huge significance on the well-being of both the planet and the human psyche. Recently named by Men's Journal as one of the most adventurous women of the last 25 years, as well as National Geographic's 2018 Adventurer of the Year, Hilaree rounds out her athletic endeavors by sharing her many stories on stages across the country in hopes of inspiring imagination and passion in the people that she encounters. Hilaree is also the mother of 2 wild boys and finds her sanity in the San Juan Mountains near her home in Telluride, Colorado. Give it up for Hilaree.
Thanks, Maddie. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in tonight. I know that we're competing with the first NFL football game, which may be competing, maybe not, maybe 2 very different sports. I just want to say that, yes, I spend a lot of time on stage doing speaking engagements all over the country, but I am still sort of learning how to navigate the Zoom world. I spend a lot of time on Zoom, but it's a very different way of presenting and talking because you're not interacting with all of you that are here watching. And so sometimes, yeah, I'm just still trying to figure it out. And one other disclaimer before we jump in is that My kids were supposed to be playing sports all night, but because it's snowing, it all got canceled. So they may come in and be somewhat disruptive at some point, but hopefully not. So I'm gonna just jump right in and let's see here. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay, so I am a ski mountaineer. This is sort of my like ideal photo of what ski mountaineering is. A lot of times I define it as, you know, you basically carry your skis around a lot more than you have them on your feet, and you're carrying heavy packs. And my niche within ski mountaineering is high altitude stuff. So I really like to suffer, and I find that suffering is really unique and special when you are carrying heavy packs and skis at high altitude. So this photo is actually skiing the Messner Couloir on Denali. I'm just gonna jump back to early days really quick. I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I was the youngest of 3 kids, and you know, Seattle has a ton of mountains, but that's not where my childhood was spent. It was spent mostly on a boat in the Northwest Passage up in Canada. And I like to think that that was sort of where my wild side was born. I was often left to my own devices and made very independent, and really got in touch with nature and just entertaining myself, which it turns out if you're a mountaineer and you spend a lot of time in the mountains, you spend a lot of time entertaining yourself in tents and storms, etc. I also had a more structured side to my life. I played a lot of basketball. I probably started when I was 6 or 7 years old, and this team that you see here, I played with all the way through being a senior in high school, and we were really good, but it was very different than my time on the boat because it really taught me how to sort of work towards the greater good and show up on days when I didn't really feel like wanting to show up, and learning how to lose as well as being really good and winning were both things I took away from basketball. I had an incredibly intense father. He was the dad who pretty much got kicked out of every game by the referees. So I remember when I was graduating my senior year, my dad told me that if I played basketball in college, he would come to every game. And so I left basketball. I never played again. And I moved to Colorado. I went to school in Colorado College, which I just found out is where Maddie, who just did the intro, we went to the same school. And I just went off the beaten path. Sports were always where I found my validity and in my family, especially with my dad. And so I stuck to that general theme. I found a sport that didn't have a sideline. So I went on my first camping trip when I was 18 years old. I touched rock, started rock climbing for the first time when I was 19, and ski touring for the first time when I was 19 years old. I have, as you saw, an older brother and sister. I like this picture because my brother actually was, he rode crew for the national team for the US in Philadelphia, and he ended up becoming a supermodel, a male supermodel in the 1990s. It was pretty funny. In this picture, we had to take it like 10 times because he was trying to like master his hair flip. And I like to credit him with making me tough. He was really physical and liked to really beat me up a lot. So he made me tough. My sister on the other side, she gets the credit for the mental toughness. She really was good in that regard. My parents, they didn't really know what to do with me when I graduated from high school because when I graduated college, because I'd sort of taken off this beaten path, and they got me a one-way ticket to France. And I ended up spending 5 years living in Chamonix, and that was where I learned everything I possibly could. I called it like a second university, everything I could about uphill, about ropes, about crevasses and glaciers. And that led me to the North Face. I had a meeting with them, I'm dating myself here, but in 1999, I had a meeting with them, they needed a female ski mountaineer to go on an expedition to India. And I just remember sitting in that meeting and basically like lying through my teeth, faking it till you make it, in terms of, they'd asked me if I'd been winter camping or in a helicopter, and I hadn't done any of those things, but somehow I convinced them to hire me. And that was when I went on my first expedition to India. From there, I was really intrigued by altitude. In 2005, I found myself on the 6th highest peak, Choi Yu, and had huge success. In 14 days, we were able to climb to the summit, ski the peak without oxygen and without any high altitude porters. And I remember thinking like, wow, I mean, what's the big deal with 8,000 meter peaks? These things are easy, no biggie. And so then my next undertaking was Gasherbrum 2 in Pakistan. And I put this photo in because it's a pretty rad photo. It makes me look like, wow, I'm really doing something amazing at this point. But to be honest, I only made about 10 turns on this entire 8-week expedition. And this was one of them. We just got hammered. We got so beat up by snow. We didn't make it to the top. We ran out of food.
Who's that?
It's
a thing from Claire.
Oh, thanks. Okay, good. So yeah, we just got absolutely destroyed. And what I took away from comparing these two expeditions was that I loved them both the same, whether I had great success or huge failure. It was like, it was a challenge either way. And that again, sort of paved the path for really defining my niche in ski mountaineering. Life goes on behind the scenes. I got married. I left Chamonix and moved to Telluride, Colorado, where I still live. I have 2 little boys, or they're really little in this picture. And it wasn't until I had them in 2008 and 2010. And in 2012, I got a call from Conrad Anker. And he was like, you have to come to Everest and join this National Geographic expedition. And at this point, I'd stepped away from expeditions and was really nervous to get back into it. But as you can see from this photo, after lots of discussion, I agreed and headed to Everest. So this was Mount Everest in 2012. And the goal was not necessarily to ski, but I had brought my skis with me. Unfortunately, it was just not the year. It was a really insane year. Like, there have been quite a few insane years on Everest since 2012. There were so many people, there was no snow, and that meant that there was a lot of rockfall because snow keeps the rock pasted to the side of the mountain. And right before we were about to go for the summit, you can kind of see how horrible the ground is that you're walking on at base camp at Everest. And I rolled my ankle really severely. I tore 3 ligaments. The Everest base camp doctors, they came down and both had a look and told me that I was probably out for 8 weeks. And because I had taken all this time away from my kids, I just couldn't accept that. So I spent a lot of time with my foot in this icy water. I cranked the music and taped my ankle really well, and 5 days later left for the summit. So this was what 2012 looked like. And remember this, because when I get into Lhotse, it's very different what this looks like compared to what our Lhotse trip looked like. So again, I went up to about 8,000 meters without oxygen, but there were just too many people to do an ascent without oxygen, because a number of people just makes the climbing way too slow. We did summit in late May of 2012. Our whole team made it, and it was incredibly cold. It was about -50 degrees on the summit, which was pretty intense. I remember walking down from the summit and looking across, and one of my climbing partners had convinced us to get permits for Lhotse. And as I was coming down with all these people around us, I started talking to Chris Erickson, and we were both like, we should just keep going. Let's keep going. Let's try to climb Lhotse, because there won't be anybody on Lhotse, and it just will really be a different experience. And so that's what we did. We rested a few hours at 8,000 meters, this camp that you can see right there, and then we kept going. And this is almost at the summit of Lhotse. We've been, you know, moving for 40 hours or so, awake for most of that time, and not a lot of snow, as you can see in the Lhotse Couloir, but the summit day, the temperatures were about 30 degrees warmer, so I could actually like take my gloves off, take oxygen off. It was pretty amazing. And what you see behind that flag is the summit of Everest. So after climbing the Lhotse Couloir with no snow, I was pretty determined to go back and try to ski it. And so what I did from 2012 to 2018 was all geared towards skiing Lhotse. In 2017, I had a really big year. This peak right here is called Papsura Peak. And I skied that with my life partner, climbing partner, Jim Morrison. And it was by far the scariest thing I've ever done. So the way I like to sort of attack the mountains is get really scary up here, and then hopefully Lhotse will be a little bit below how scary this thing was, so that it's within my wheelhouse. So I don't know if that's always a sane way to do things, but it's worked for me. In 2017, we also trained a lot on Denali. We did 2 summits in 2 weeks. One we skied the Messner, and then the other one we did the Cassin Ridge, which is a 5-day alpine climb. And again, this was all with a vision towards Lhotse and skiing the Lhotse Couloir. I found myself in 2018 with a really good friend, Kit Delorier, and I got to do my second trip to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And what is amazing about this place in terms of training is that you really gain this incredible respect for self-rescue, for what kind of risk you can take when you're absolutely depending on just yourself and your ski partners. Every day that you set out there, because you have so much light, we were there in May, is anywhere from a 12 to 16 hour day, because the distances are so vast. So again, I was trying to just build up that endurance of moving sort of nonstop for long days at a time. The skiing there, we lucked out. It was pretty incredible. And I've been now 2 trips with Kit to the Arctic. And then, I don't know how many of you guys have ever been to Telluride, Colorado, but this is the Via Ferrata. So when our trip to Lhotse was in the fall, so we couldn't do any training skiing when we were in the summertime in Colorado. So I did a lot of rock climbing, dragging my kids on the Via Ferrata, which sometimes they love, sometimes not so much. I forced them up a couple of different 14ers that summer. And then Jim and I would just set out for super long days. This one, we started in the town of Telluride and went for about 10 hours and climbed, I think, 11 different 13ers, 13,000 foot peaks in one day. And so we would just try to do as much of that as we could to build up that endurance. Okay, so this is Lhotse. Hopefully a lot of you on this call are skiers. And when you look at this picture, you can see the ski line off of Lhotse. It's a 28,000 foot peak. It's just under 27,940 feet. And it goes from the very summit, and it's about 2,000 feet through this crazy narrow couloir. And then it spills out onto the Lhotse face for another 5,000 feet. So it's massive, and it's been tried, I don't know, maybe a dozen times, 15 times in the past, and just no one's had success. And primarily that's because everyone tried in the spring, and the spring has less snow and more people, and it's just really hard to make something like this happen at this elevation. So at the very end of August 2018, we flew to Kathmandu, which is kind of a crazy big metropolis. It was Jim and myself, and we had 2 filmers with us, Dutch and Nick Kalish, and I knew both of them, but they were young and neither of them had ever been above 20,000 feet. So we really had no expectation of them climbing above Camp 2 on Lhotse. But as you'll see, they did a lot more than that. I just like this picture because of the commentary. If you stay here, you can see good view from here, but turns out August is still the monsoon season and you can't see anything. And it was a really severe monsoon. So it stuck through and it lingered through a lot of September, making it really difficult for us to get any of our gear, etc. We went through Fortse, which is where the Khumbu Climbing Center is. And this is a really pretty amazing town. It's where all my child just walked in, sorry. It's where all, many of the Sherpa that work on Everest and other 8,000 meter peaks go to be trained. It was started by Conrad Anker and his wife, Jennifer Lowe Anker. And we had 5 Sherpa that were joining us in this attempt to ski Lhotse, and they all came from Fortse. So this is one of our Sherpa, Fura, his mom. It was potato harvest season and Jim was trying to help and she was like so unimpressed with his skills at harvesting potatoes. And she let him do this for like 2 minutes before she just shook her head and like took the hoe back from him and basically kicked him out of the field. Jim had never been to Everest from the south side before. His spring was spent on the north side in China, and he had summited Everest from the north route and also climbed and skied Choi Yu. So this was actually his 3rd 8,000 meter peak in about 4 months time. So it was a very intense year for him. And to see it from the Nepal side is definitely the more iconic side of Mount Everest. And the first time seeing the ice fall, which is this shaded piece right here, it's really intimidating. It's a very scary piece of the mountain on the south side. So we had our gear, it made it, but it didn't all make it at once. It came in short amounts of time. So we were at base camp probably around September 7th, and we all had to wait for the puja to happen, which is sort of a holy blessing on the mountain. And that didn't happen until September 11th. And these are our 5 Sherpas. So you have Tashi and Palden on the left, and they're brothers. Palden was our Sirdar, so he was in charge of all the movement on the mountain. In the middle is Erkin, and he's young, 22 years old, and was the brother of a climber that I had done a lot of Himalayan expeditions with. Fura, that was his mother that you saw in the field. He trekked in with us, so we knew him pretty well at this point. And then Ela on the right end is Palden's son, and he was only, I think, 20 years old at the time of this expedition. And he'd summited Everest before, but neither Erkin or Ela had summited Lhotse before. So while we were waiting for the puja to happen, Jim and I would walk through the couple miles through the moraine to check out the icefall. And I remember this day particularly because Jim we had 2 icefall doctors as well. And Jim looked at this and he was just like, there is no possible way we can get through this. And Nima, the icefall doctor that was standing next to him, looked at it and he was like, oh, it actually looks really good. I think it should be pretty easy. So just very different views on how this was going to work out. Our first day in the icefall didn't happen until September 12th. So we were already getting pretty nervous. None of our skis or boots had arrived yet. They were still stuck in Kathmandu in the monsoon fog. And we were trying to bust our way through the icefall, which in some cases can take a couple weeks. But just like Nima said, by some miracle, we managed to make the path through the icefall in 3 days, which is really, really incredible and lucky. We set up an interim camp at about 19,000 feet, and you can see Lhotse in the background there, but we were still not quite close enough to see what the snow was like on the face. And the crazy thing about the Lhotse Couloir is that you can't see it from anywhere. So that top 2,000 feet that are in the couloir, you can only see from the southeast ridge of Everest. And obviously we weren't going up there, we were just going to Lhotse. So we knew we would never see that until the day of the climb. We spent a lot of time trying to navigate through some crazy big crevasses in the breadloaves. This is actually above the ice fall. But again, it took just 1 or 2 days before we were able to get through it. And it was a little sketchy trying to make that in bad weather, but we were able to push through. And one thing to point out is that this is Camp 2 at about 21,000 feet, and we were the only group there. So we were the only group in the entire Western Cumulus. So I know you've probably all seen, and even that photo I showed you of 2012, how many people go to Everest. No one goes there in the fall. So it was just our 5 Sherpa and the 4 of us. And on one hand, it's really incredible to be in there by yourself, but on the other hand, it makes it a lot more difficult to keep the trail in good shape, so that you're basically breaking trail every single time you go anywhere, because there's so few of you, and the wind and the precipitation just continues to put snow on the trail. So this was just coming back down to a cache over here where we'd sort of left it in the fog, and this is Nuptse. And at one point, Jim and I kind of snuck in and grabbed as much of it as we could. And between that and the Sherpas getting the next load from there, this whole thing ripped and just blew all this cache off into crevasses way over here. We were able to retrieve most of it, but this whole face is what you have to walk under from Camp 1 to Camp 2. And it's really intense. And again, just for those of you that don't know, Everest and Lhotse share about 80% of the same route. You only break off at the very top of the Lhotse face. So this is walking back down. We had to go all the way back down to base camp at this point in hopes that our skis had arrived. So we had about 2 days resting here. And the second day before we wanted to go back up, finally our kit arrived. And we put our ski boots on. Like, a big part of our plan was to be as fast and light as possible, because we thought that was really key in being successful. What that meant was we were walking out of base camp 2 miles through the moraine in our ski boots. We weren't wearing mountaineering boots at all. We committed 100% to ski boots. We left our down suits behind and committed to basically the kit that you see us wearing right there. Knowing, because we'd done enough 8,000 meter climbing, that we could move fast and hopefully stay ahead of the cold and not have as much gear to be brought up. So in ski boots, ice climbing that first day with this whole kit and super heavy packs, breaking snow. It snowed about a meter between 17,000 and 19,000 feet. And so we were trying to be out ahead of the Sherpa because they were carrying way heavier loads than us. But at least we could try to break the trail to get back to Camp 2. But at the end, it was about a 12-hour day that first day in our ski boots. And it was really intense. And can you guys all hear this? The sound of crampons and ski boots on a aluminum ladder. It's really bad.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
Last ladder before Lhotse face.
So one thing about the ice fall in 2018 versus 2012 was that there was one ladder in the entire ice fall. In 2012 or on any other normal year, you're probably walking over about 20 to 30 different ladders. So that was just our luck. And a big part of that luck was the fact that an avalanche had come down the day before our puja and filled in a huge amount of the crevasses. So luck or totally sketchy, a little bit of both, to say the least. So we moved through the breadloaves, and that was where we had a couple more ladders, and made our way with our skis on our feet finally up to Camp 2. So this is Camp 2. And again, this was our camp right here, was the only camp up there. What you see, all these things over here, we call them ghost camps because they were left up there by other outfitters, and they were super eerie. It felt really like these crazy, they melted out and were sitting up on top of mushrooms, and they actually, like, all the trash had fallen out of the sides. It's not a great method. So we were really conscientious and careful about packing out everything that we brought up there. This just gives you a little overview of our route. So we had a Camp 3. Typically, Lhotse has a Camp 4 right here. And we decided to skip that because, again, that meant more tents, more sleeping bags, more rotations up this face. And we didn't want to do any of that. We wanted to be fast and light. So we did Camp 3. And then the idea was to go from Camp 3 in a 4,000-foot push to the summit. I just like this picture. It's pretty incredible being up at altitude. I don't know if many of you have seen, there's a film about this called Lhotse, and I don't know how many of you have seen it, but there's a little bit of history to Jim Morrison, who's my partner here. And he's had a lot of tragedy in his life. And I say that because there's something about being up high, being in this thin air that just really, I don't know, it just helps you. I can't say I'm a very religious person, except for in these experiences where it feels like you're in touch with something just so much bigger than ourselves and our humanity. It's really incredible, and it's nights like these that really are what inspire me to do what I do. We moved pretty quickly up to Camp 3, which was at about a little over 24,000 feet. And we felt that time was running out. We knew that we had to be skiing from the summit before like the 7th of October was sort of our plan. And we were going to be set up even as soon as possible so we could do it sooner. And really what happened here, we got to Camp 3, we spent the night without oxygen, we had our skis, and this lower part of the Lhotse face is one of the hardest, trickiest parts because it's super steep, it's easily 50 degrees, and there's ice everywhere. And we wanted to ski that before we went up to the summit to ski the whole 7,000 feet at once. And neither of us had skied anything since May. So these were really our first turns on the mountain. And you can see it's kind of a hard bird's eye view, but you can see how steeply this falls away. And then there's a big bergschrund, which is where the lower glacier starts. And all this right here is just straight up glacial ice. So we had to really find this bubble snow and this path down. And one thing to note, when I was there in 2012, that bergschrund was a 30-foot ice climb to get up and over. And in 2018, we could ski right through it. So things were looking good. But when we got back down to camp on the 27th of September, we got this weather report. And it looks really good until you get to October 1st, and then the winds double, they triple, and then they're almost 80 kilometers an hour by the time you get here. So we kind of freaked out, and we were like, we have no rest days. We're taking one rest day, the 28th of September, and then we're going to start up the 29th and go for the summit on the 30th. And fortunately, Paulden, the Sirdar, was on board, and the Sherpas saw how hard we were working and how much effort we were making to be ready, and they were ready. And it was just the coolest team I've ever been a part of. And the morning of the 29th rolled around, and we left camp at really early in the morning, and it took us about 5 hours to get to our high camp again at 24,000 feet. So this is about the same place right here. This is about the same place that you saw that picture from 2012 where there were like 200 people in this exact same spot. Really different when you're by yourself. We got up at about 12:15 that morning and made some coffee and ate some oatmeal, which pretty much makes me gag, but I stomach it down and got out of the tent. Jim and I, we were trying to do this without oxygen, but if you can imagine, we started climbing September 12th and we were going for the summit September 30th. So it was not a lot of time to acclimate. We had amazing conditions on the Lhotse face, really firm, so we could climb pretty well without having to break trail too much. But once we kind of started turning around towards Everest and getting onto that north aspect, the snow just got deeper and more breakable and a lot more difficult to climb. And we just got slower and slower. That's Everest in the background, which is pretty incredible. But you can see Everest got sun a lot sooner than we did, so we were pretty darn cold. As we turned and got into the Lhotse Couloir, we sort of succumbed to the realization that we had to choose between no O's or skiing because we just didn't have time. And we chose to put on oxygen and continue up. And this is right before the summit. And it's a spot that I never in my life could have imagined would be filled in with snow. So this was the exact same spot in 2012. And you can look again at here it was in 2018. So the rock is still there, but there were ways to get around it. And for the first time, I actually thought we might be able to ski the whole thing from the summit. So on the summit, we had Ela with us, and it was his first summit of Lhotse. Erkin had actually summited the day before, and so it was a complete summit for the whole team, which was really amazing. The fact that Nick and Dutch both made it to the summit and were filming and were conscious was pretty incredible. We had really good conditions. We summited at about 1:30. The wind started picking up just as was forecast by these crazy Swiss forecasters. Started picking up at about 2 p.m. We started skiing at about 2:15. I'd say it was a steady 20 kilometers an hour by the time we started to go down. So I just love this photo. Jim's pole is in the summit snow on Lhotse, and we're clipped in, and the snow is getting blown all around us, but we're skiing, and it's amazing how absolutely utterly exhausted you can be on the summit, but then as soon as you click into your skis, it's just like that switching of sports. And you know, I've skied since I was 3 years old, and I was so ready for this and so excited, and we just had a lot of luck on our side. So these are some of the first turns. Coming down again, I have a little video to show you that's more my edit, not the Lhotse edit, so it's a little bit different, but it shows some of the turns off the very summit, which was about 60 degrees. This is, again, is moving a little bit lower, but I'll just show you this video really quick.
Up top, top of the world, Lhotse.
I was powder the whole way, just pure powder, like champagne powder. I think I've never been to Deer Valley, but it was basically just like Deer Valley the whole time, right off the summit. There was 1 or 400 turns that were slightly variable, ranging from the worst snow you've ever imagined to powder. It's good. It's fun.
This is the main choke.
my God. We just skied the Lhotse Couloir and the Lhotse face. All in one go. Where did we put our skis on? On the summit of Lhotse. You told me it was steep, but you didn't really say it's like a cliff. 28,000 feet to 21.
21,000 feet in some of the most variable, challenging, death-defying conditions I've ever experienced.
Oh man, we pulled off the summit of Lhotse and skiing from the tippity top all the way back down to Camp 2. We just seized the window we had and made it happen, and it was really hard and we're all totally wrecked. But we did it.
So there's so many parts of that video, but the main thing, I don't know if you guys recognize that choke that we skied through. That was at 27,000 feet, and it was about 170 centimeters wide. And my skis were just like 172 centimeters, and Jim's were 178 centimeters, which is really small for him. He's 6'3" and 200 pounds, and you have to like find the gear that lets you ski hard, but also allows you to be lightweight and make these turns on a dime and know that you can control them. So it was a really fine line. It crushed me, to say the least. I pretty much spent most of 2019 eating chocolate and potato chips because I was so decimated from that expedition and just doing it so fast. And you know, it was less than 3 weeks from base camp to the summit and back, and it was amazing and a lifetime goal. I know I'm we got a little bit more time here, so I just wanted to share a quick story about a trip to Antarctica that was just in January. And this was getting ready for that trip. And I like this photo because it's flash forward 8 years and my kids have grown up a little bit. And now they're like, instead of wondering where their mom has gone, they're like, when are you going on an expedition again? Like, you're getting restless, you need to go do something. So it's just funny how it's changed with my kids and how they see these trips. So really quick, just Antarctica is somewhere I've always wanted to go. I've tried a few times and had trips fall apart and just not made it before. And so in this particular case, we are going to the Vincent Massif, which is over here in the Ellsworth mountain range. You fly in on this big, huge, crazy plane and land on the ice, which was pretty unique for me. I've flown in a lot of helicopters and small planes, etc., but this was definitely a different experience. And they really like their big motor vehicles down there. So this was a Ford F550, which I didn't even know existed, but look at those tires, they're insane. We had a few days before we could fly in. So this is with Jimmy Chin, and we were like riding these bikes around on the big wide open ice. A lot of these photos, if you're familiar with Jimmy Chin and the filming and the photos he's done, like a lot of these photos are his, and they're really pretty incredible. Jim and I playing Scrabble, we're pretty competitive, so even a Scrabble game can turn bad, but eventually we got out of the camp and flew into the Vincent base camp, and Conrad was there. So in my mind, we had this amazing dream team, but it was Conrad Anker, Jimmy Chin, Jim Morrison, and myself. And we'd come to climb this line to the summit of Vincent and then ski back down. And it had only ever been climbed once before by Conrad in, I think, 1998. This was a really unique part of the Vincent base camp.
Breakfast before we go climb Vincent.
We're not even allowed to show that.
That's definitely not.
We're talking.
Really
Not even allowed.
Are we allowed to say that we didn't get out of our tents before the sun hit them? The sun hit them, perfect time.
Perfect.
Roll in.
This is an insight into what the 2020 fall color is for men for North Face. Yellow head to toe with Conrad and Jim. It was pretty funny, the yellow bees. We started up the central ice stream, and it was really pretty dicey, to say the least. We started out with good snow, but then for whatever reason, it just ended up getting really slabby and hollow and pretty sketchy. And as Conrad was walking up here, there's like a little bit of like these zipper crusts that were breaking and releasing down the slope, and you can see over here all this avalanche debris that had slid from a prior date. We, instead of staying out on this face over here where this avalanche debris was, we ended up, we called it cul-de-sacing, where we were climbing up these cul-de-sacs trying to stay as close to the rocks as possible. So just to give some background, this is already a 9,000 plus foot climb from the base camp way down here to the summit of Vinson. And adding these cul-de-sacs made it a little bit more than a 10,000 foot day. And you're going from 6,000 feet to over 16,000 feet. So we're probably 5,000 or 6,000 feet up the face at this point, and we're still smiling. It's warm, Jimmy's still taking photos, everything's good. So we get to the summit, you can see the weather's changed, the wind's blowing. I've got every stitch of clothing on me that I had in my backpack, and it's 11:30 at night. And we're looking at doing a first ski descent down this massive face that has all kinds of red flags in terms of avalanche debris. So we spent a lot of time on the summit here talking about what we were going to do, and the pros and cons and what it would look like if we actually did the skiing.
I think we climbed Mount Everest today.
Oh.
How long was that? Off the couch, straight to 16, at the pole, which felt like 18.5. And whoopsie. It was hard.
That was really hard.
That was as hard as your Everest day, you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, just that last hour was really hard.
Yeah.
I just wasn't myself.
I wasn't either.
I was like, dude, if we go down, do we go that way? Yeah. Let's go down in here out of the wind and figure this out. But look at that page. I know, that's the page.
So we actually sat at this spot on the shoulder of Vinson for over an hour and talked about whether we should ski this route or not, or should we just ski the regular route. Conrad left straight away. He's not a big skier. He's like, forget it, I'm going down the regular route. And I think we all had these preconceptions that because we were such a tight-knit team and we had over 100 expeditions under our belts between the four of us, and we'd known each other for 20 years, that we were just gonna walk up this and be super successful. And it was one of the harder decisions I've ever had to make to not ski that face. And ultimately, we tried to look at it in hindsight and be like, hey, so if we went down and we got caught in a slide, we would be asking other people to come rescue us. And it was, 1 o'clock in the morning at this point, and it was just not a responsible thing to do. So we ended up bailing on skiing the central ice stream, and we skied the regular route on Vinson. And at about 2 o'clock in the morning, we'd caught up with Conrad and another friend, Garrett, at this point, and they were skiing the roped route. And Jim and I decided we wanted to take a little off the beaten path and ski the steep face. And so this is your normal camp 1 on Vincent. And if you look over here, you can see a lot of the avid debris, and it gives you some gauge of the size. we dropped in onto this face, and as soon as I got on it, I was terrified. Jim skied by me, and he ended up starting an avalanche that we were both fine from, but it was a really good exclamation point on a really long day. And we ended up having a 19-hour round trip and made it back to base camp in one piece. And yeah, that's just sort of a quick down and dirty. I'm gonna wrap it up there because that's about our hour time. If you guys have questions for me, please jump in.
Awesome. Thank you, Hilaree. That was incredible. I don't know about everyone else, but it makes me really excited.
Cool.
Excited for winter.
Yeah, hopefully it gets you guys excited. It was a good distraction to some of the fires and things that we're all dealing with right now.
For sure. For those of you that do have questions, if you could ask them in the chat box, we do have quite a few people on here. It'll prevent from talking over each other. The first question I got in here was from Max, and it's, I'll quote him. "Thank you for inspiring us, Hilaree. I'm from Minneapolis, where we get plenty of cold and snow, but are lacking in the elevation department. What advice would you give to someone interested in alpinism and mountaineering who doesn't have easy access to mountains? How could someone acquire the necessary fitness, skills, mental fortitude, etc., without being in the mountains or during current pandemic?"
Ooh, I mean, it's tough to get that full skill set without venturing into the mountains, but there are really some good training programs out there. Steve House is probably one of my favorite ones. He's got a program called the Uphill Athlete, and really he dives in. He's a pretty well-known alpinist himself, and he dives into just how you can train and get into shape with that sort of goal in mind of being an alpinist. Some things I've done, I like to go on hikes and just like carry extra weight in my pack. It's really, I think, important to find people that motivate you to go outside and do some of these things. I would normally recommend trying to find a climbing gym in your area, but a lot of those are very restricted right now due to COVID, and I know a lot are starting to open up, but I think that's a great place to find people, like-minded people that might inspire you or have ideas locally. Yeah, it's tough to really train for altitude without going to altitude and knowing what that, you know, how your body reacts to that. I have something called I have this special pressurized tent that I use for weeks before I go on to a big expedition like that. And you can set the altitude to like raise where you're sleeping at night. So that is a really good way to train. So if you're living more or less at sea level, you could probably, you know, by sleeping in this tent, get yourself up to being acclimated to 10, 12,000 feet. Yeah, and then I don't know, I think a aspirational way would be to find some goal and hope that, you know, by spring you can travel to Washington State and have a goal of climbing Mount Rainier or Mount Shasta or something like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Hilaree. And for those of you that are Coloradans aspiring, check out the Colorado Mountain Club for educational opportunities as well. Just shameless plug.
Yeah, no, but it is true. It's so great to get the education, especially right now. I see so many new outdoor enthusiasts in the mountains, at campgrounds, etc. And getting that training is so important.
Totally. Thank you for that. A question from Bella. Hi, Hilaree. Your story and adventures are so inspiring. As a college student and aspiring environmental journalist, soon to graduate, how can I work to enter the outdoor mountaineering world?
Wait, will you say where she lives?
She is aspiring college student. She actually worked for us as an intern, Bella. She is in Colorado currently.
Okay. I mean, there's all kinds of different, like I think Protect Our Winters is a great place to work. North Face is now out of Denver, so that's another good Colorado company. And I mention those companies because they, again, will provide that sort of meeting ground for finding partners and like-minded outdoor enthusiasts. But really, I think just exploring your backyard, because that's what we can do right now, is really imperative. And just getting outside, and again, like Maddie said, getting the education to back that up. And if you can combine this environmental education with outdoor adventure, I think that's a pretty good path to follow right now.
Awesome. I think we all kind of need to hear that right now. From Kristen from our Pikes Peak group, how do you keep your feet warm in ski boots on these high peaks?
Oh, that's a really good question. I have all kinds of like crazy ways to keep my feet warm. So one of them is I wash my feet every day with snow, which seems crazy. But I think the snow just keeps them clean, and it like gets blood flowing. I have a couple tricks of things that I put on my feet. One is cayenne pepper works. I don't always use that one, but then there's this CBD balm that a friend of mine makes here in Telluride called Trauma Balm, and I rub that on my feet, and it actually works to heat your feet up before you put them in your boot. And then I use heated socks as well. And in the case of Lhotse, I had 2 sets of batteries. I went through both of them. And you know, my feet were actually pretty okay by the time I got down to Camp 2. So they were cold, but at no point was I ever like in dire foot emergency, because really your feet are #1 priority. And if you can't keep them warm, you have to turn around. So I have a lot of tricks. Brand new socks. I make sure that I have brand new socks for the biggest day, for the summit day. So those are a few of my tricks.
Awesome. I haven't heard of the cayenne pepper. That's really funny.
Yeah, that's what I got from Conrad. He's pretty Oh, and the other thing Conrad swears by is getting a pedicure, which sounds crazy, especially from Conrad Anker, who's this like hard man alpinist. He's like sending us getting a pedicure. Make sure you get your pedicure before you go to Antarctica. And that's just because it gets the dead skin off, it gets your nails, but you know, whatever. But he swears by it. I haven't done that yet, but I don't know.
I love it.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
That's awesome. Another question from Fiona. Thank you for your time, Hilaree. I was wondering how you can train your body to cope with the long days, the lack of sleep, and the cold. Additionally, what's the best piece of advice you have regarding dealing with failure in the mountains and feeling confident and competent following failed attempts?
So the long days in the mountains are really hard, and I try to do that with sometimes my children. Here's one right here, he's hiding. Post kids, I came out as an athlete a lot stronger than I was before, and that was mentally strong. And I think that's because you just put in long days, and I realized that I needed to incorporate that in my training. So even if I wasn't putting in a long day skiing, I needed to be out and just moving and on my feet for a long day. And we did, I kind of showed you that in some of the slides, really long days in the Sierras and here in Telluride prior to Lhotse. And, you know, 8-10 hours is plenty to get you in shape for that. I don't recommend this, but I tend to deprive myself a little bit of water, because a lot of what I do is that day on Everest in 2012, my whole zipper froze and my water was all inside that. And so the whole day I went 12 hours without a sip of water, and that's not good. But I try to have moments where I don't have, you know, I don't have everything I need. And then what I'm trying to learn from that is what happens to my body and what happens to me mentally. So, and I try to do that in a controlled environment, so that when I'm out somewhere where I don't have the luxury of then coming home and sleeping in a bed, I kind of know what to expect when things go wrong. So that's sort of worst case scenario training. What was the second part of that question, Maddie? I'm looking.
Yeah, it was about like failed attempts and how do you deal with failure in the mountains, and kind of feeling confident and competent after a failure.
So that I sort of talked about that trip to Gasherbrum too, and that was a really pretty colossal failure. You know, I glossed over it, and then I said I love both of those trips equally, but I didn't love that trip for a long time. It took a little while to look back at that and understand that failure. And I've had some pretty epic ones. Papsura Peak in India, I tried in 2013 and failed, and one of the team members got really sick, and a whole bunch of things happened. Burma was a trip that I did for National Geographic, and that I almost, that failure basically changed my whole life moving forward. I almost quit my career. My marriage went away. A lot of intense things. So I can't. The crazy part is today, looking back at those failures, I wouldn't change any of it. I really, honest to God, just really learned so much from every one of those hardships. And without those things, I don't think I ever could have appreciated how fortunate and how lucky I was to be successful on Lhotse. So I think my philosophy today, after doing this for 20 years, is that you can't, everything is a balance, and you have to suffer, you have to have hardship, you have to have failure to really appreciate when you have success, when you're close to perfection. And balancing those doesn't happen on a daily basis, it's over time. And I think when I realize that, it helps me accept those failures, and I don't look forward to them, but I accept them and incorporate them into who I am.
Thank you for that. That's awesome, especially as we kind of enter really turbulent times right now.
Right.
So appreciate it.
Yeah, and just to speak to that, I mean, this is a really tough time, and especially for me, like my whole life has been defined by traveling and big, you know, unwieldy adventures, and the last, you know, 6-7 months have been anything but that. And it's how, you know, kind of drawing from those experiences, from those failures, those successes, to really wake up each day in this crazy, tumultuous world that we're in right now, and try to start fresh and be present and take it one minute at a time.
For sure. This was definitely a really good distraction from it, I can tell you that much.
Yeah, I hope so. Good for me too.
Awesome. A couple more questions for you.
Okay.
From Matt Adkins, I'll quote him, but so cool. You're such an inspiration. As a mountaineer, I just moved to Colorado, and naturally there's a lot of lines that I not only want to climb, but ski as well. The problem is I don't have a skiing background. I understand skiing resorts is the most logical way to progress. However, it's expensive and not quite my scene. Any advice on how to get into ski mountaineering, spending as much time in the backcountry as possible?
Okay, so two things there. You just moved to Colorado. Colorado has one of the scariest snowpacks that I've really ever seen outside of Antarctica. And just keep that in mind. The second thing would be get yourself into an AVI course, an avalanche course, an AVI 1 course. And that's not just to learn about the Colorado snowpack. That is a way to get on your backcountry gear and a way to meet people. So I think something like the Colorado Mountain Club is a huge resource, the American Alpine Club. These are all resources for finding people to get out and go in the backcountry with. I totally get that the ski area scene is a very different scene than backcountry skiing. And there's so much in Colorado. There's so much, but you just really have to understand the snowpack here because it's really sketchy. And that's just because we have a shallow snowpack. It's lots of cold. But I think those would be the two best ways to start is find your people and get educated at the same time, and then just take it slow. Take it slow. Try to get out as much as you can, but read your avalanche forecast and know your gear, know your equipment. There's, I keep going back to Maddie just saying there's a lot of resources out there, and a huge playground in Colorado.
Awesome, thank you for that. Few more questions here. The next one is, I'll just quote him as well. Thank you so much for the meeting, Hilaree. It was so inspiring and helpful. I'm currently living in Georgetown, Colorado, and I'm just starting my ski mountaineer path. I understand it's very similar question, but between now and then, how would you suggest I prepare throughout the winter for ski mountaineering? So it's similar. Sorry, I thought this was a little different, but
yeah. Preparing for. It's September, so you've got some time. I think just being outside is a great way to prepare. Going uphill, if you have it in your backyard, is another great way. I like to run because I think that's really a very simple sport and that you don't need a lot of equipment to run. And it's really great training for ski mountaineering.
Awesome. And then from Telluride, Colorado, this is Andrew from Saturday Climbing in Telluride. What's your favorite ski line? What's your favorite ski line and climbing route in the Telluride area?
Hi, Andrew. It was nice to meet you guys the other day. Well, I met Andrew at Pipeline Wall, which is just at the end of the valley. The rock climbing in Telluride is it's not epic by any stretch of the imagination, but my favorite climb is to do the 3-pitch skyline arete, and then that tops out on the Via Ferrata, and then I will just finish by doing the Via Ferrata. And I think it's not hard climbing, it's 5'8", but it's incredibly aesthetic and just pretty cool. I've forced my kids to do it twice now. I made them do it the first time, I think, when they were 7. Oh my gosh. Ski line, I have a lot of favorite ski lines. My favorite ski area to ski is the side country out of Telluride, Bear Creek. And it's not controlled. It's super dangerous. I've been going back there for 20 years. San Joaquin is one of my favorite lines. The Grandfather is one of my favorite lines. Some of these are pretty hidden secret lines, but Telluride's incredible for its couloir skiing. And I did a ton of training on all of those lines because a lot of them have cliffs, so you have to rappel through. They're really intense lines. Yeah, so
Awesome.
My answer. Yeah.
Great answer. We have 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Thanks to everyone for bearing with us. One of them is, have you ever had self-doubt? You kind of answered this one, but I think speaking to kind of all of our inner voices, our inner demons, and how have you dealt with it?
Yes, I have had self-doubt. I've had a lot of it. And this is easy for me to say, you know, I'm in my mid 40s now, and I have gotten much better at it's sort of just staying present is how I help tackle that self-doubt, by focusing on what I'm doing, because usually I'm doubting what is about to come and it hasn't happened yet, so it's really a waste of energy. So what I try to do is isolate it. I call it the hamster wheel. It's my hamster wheel that goes on in my brain of self-doubt that kind of goes around and around, and if I can just recognize that I'm doing it and focus on actually what I'm physically or mentally doing in the moment, that works to contradict that self-doubt. And I think I've learned over the years to just be a little kinder to myself. And by that, I mean, you can counter self-doubt by just giving yourself compliments, like, well, I made it this far, so I can keep going, you know, just silly little things. I also like to really smile when I'm in the middle of heavy suffering, which is often linked to self-doubt. So just the act of smiling kind of alleviates some of that stress.
I love it. Eric Weinmeier also puts it well, the double pessimism, you know, like, I'm really cold, but at least it's like really crappy out.
Yeah, exactly.
The double. You just got to make light of it.
Yeah, like some of my best climbing partners are people just with a sense of humor, who can, whether it's self-deprecating humor or just situational humor, it's that ability to be light. And even if you aren't entirely feeling it inside or in your head, the act of laughing or making someone else laugh, or like Eric would say, you know, well, you know, just making really funny comments about how horrible the weather is, or whatever. It really kind of helps. It just breaks that chain of negativity.
Totally. And then last question from the audience, the most favorite of all, about gear. Do you recommend any resources by which to start a search for suitable ski mountaineering gear in Colorado, besides North Face or North Face?
Well, I mean, if a really good place is it's on Facebook, and it's like Telluride. What's it called? Oh my gosh, like the Telluride Gear Swap or Telluride Rants. People sell a lot of gear on there, and it's less expensive. Craigslist. This is if you're trying to find gear that isn't like brand new from the shop. A lot of ski towns have fall gear swaps, which are often where you can find discounted gear or like rental equipment from the earlier season. That'd probably be my best guess. I don't know, does the Colorado Mountain Club do any kind of gear swaps, or what that is?
We do, and we usually do one twice a year, but we're currently not going to do it this year just because it's so tough with the pandemic. But yeah, I second all that. Check the groups, and Craigslist. All that is great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Michelle, we'll make sure we send that jacket to you. We appreciate everyone kind of tuning in and all of your awesome questions. Hilaree, thank you so much. This was a really great break from all the craziness going on in the world right now. So we really appreciate your stories.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.